On the one hand, running a medical device company, as the government thinks of us as, is this really unlikely place for an ID person. But on the other hand, it's kind of the perfect place because it's about connecting some really complex human problems to some really nuanced human-based solutions. And that's something that biomedical engineers don't do, and engineers certainly don't do, and marketing people really, really don't do. So it's kind of the natural place for us to fall, and I think it's kind of where we have the most to offer. And so that's I'll be talking about that. I'll be talking about a lot of the stuff we're doing. I kind of want to give a little bit of a background first about 3D printing, because I think that's the exciting stuff, and that's really what is most interesting for like any student who's going to be jumping out into the real world now, that it's not just a new tool. It's a new tool has changed everything. It's rewritten all the rules potentially, and it's going to go some really exciting places, and I want to really kind of express that. So my quick background, yeah, industrial design. I designed lots and lots and lots of mass-produced injection molded parts. And fun stuff, I used to actually try to impress dates by going through Fry's Electronics and say, I did that. Oh, look, I did that. And and I thought that would work, and then I realized after the fact that that doesn't impress dates. So word of warning to anybody who's going to try that: it doesn't work. Don't do it. It's the kind of date you don't want to impress. But the one thing with mass production, it got us great products that are well engineered and really, really cheap. But what we traded for that, we traded something got lost in the translation. Mass production also created a whole lot of clones. Everything now is made for everyone. Nothing is made for anyone. And for most things, it's weird. We all have the same phone in our pocket as the Pope. Go figure. That's just weird. But that's one of the results of mass production. But for most things, that's fine. That neither me or the Pope are the worse for it. But for certain things, for certain areas of human needs, that's where things really fall short. And that's where I think the exciting stuff is, and the challenges to meet that. So additive fabrication comes along 20 years ago, this year actually, but it was for a long time not as interesting. It's gone through some changes recently. In short, additive fabrication, for anyone who's just come out from under a rock, it's a way to add a bunch of, it's creating a product, a part, by adding layer by layer by layer, very, very fine layers until you have a physical artifact in hand, and these are all created that way. That's the short of it. Up until about 5 years ago, it was used to create a part that would ultimately be made in mass production. So you'd create something that was a representation of something that would exist in the real world someday. But you weren't creating the final product itself. Now that's all changed, because now you can actually 3D print your final product. And as trivial as that sounds, that's really a game changer. That changes all the rules. So I thought I'd list, okay, the 9 things you can only do with additive fabrication. And I guess, well, I was rehearsing this for my girlfriend, and she's like, that's such a guide just to list everything and just to always make all these lists. I've got like 9 of this and 2 of this and 3 of this. And I had like 7 responses for her. And it's like, I shouldn't go into that. But so anyway, yeah, the first one of the 9 things that you can only do with additive fabrication. Create uniqueness. Obviously you can't do that with injection molding. Injection molding makes clones. You can actually create uniqueness with additive fabrication. And where that gets exciting is, I think, in some of these, let's see if this works, in some of these products where you can create something the way it used to be made, almost a handmade thing, an individual thing for an individual person addressing an individual need. So that lamp, for example, that was created by a group out in Boston, a bunch of MIT artists, called Nervous System, and it's worth checking out their stuff. Okay, it's a cool lamp, but here's the way it was created. It was, okay, that just blew the whole magic of that little segue. So it was created, they grow each one. It's algorithmically grown based on a formula that derived from fan coral. And so no 2 lamps that they make are identical. They can't be. They're grown per person, per purchaser. So it's kind of a return to this, almost a craft, because this is certainly a reaction against modern injection molded identical stuff. So even though it's a polymer lamp, it falls into a different category. It's now more of an art. It's now something that is unique and individual in a way that you just can't do with any with any other part, with any other product. So this lamp here is one of those 24. I don't know which one, but they'll only ever make 24. And so it is a unique artifact. It is, you know, I don't know if that bumps up the value. It bumps up a perceived value, but it's really an expression of today and what can be done with these times. So because of the flexibility and the inherent versatility of 3D printing, you can start addressing things the way nature does. You can start getting biomimetic. This is also from nervous system. You know, the ultimate expression of an individual design, the thumbprint. You know, and they make a lamp. This is through Materialize MGX. This is a lamp that is as individual as the thumbprint. They're working on a way to make it so that each person's thumbprint becomes the lamp. Something about that is as a unique expression that you just, it's kind of thumbing its nose at the world of injection molded everything. Or this from Freedom of Creation, the trabeculae bowl. It's based on the idea of the structure inside a bone. Or this is it's called the Snotty Vase, designed by Marcel Wanders about 10 years ago, actually. He three-dimensionally scanned a sneeze. So this is the flying, tumbling 90 mile an hour as we hear snot that somebody digitally captured in 3D, surfaced, expanded digitally, 3D printed, and sold at MoMA for $600. It's like, that's a score. If you can say, hey, I'm such a good designer, when I sneeze, I can sell that shit for $600 at the MoMA. Then that's when you know you've nailed it. You know, it's like time to, you're done, you're good. So create for the body, because here's kind of, I think, the ultimate expression is our bodies are unique. You know, that's kind of the definition of unique. Well, so the first thing you have to do is you have to scan. You have to get the body in, and I'll dive into that a little bit. This is what a 3D scan looks like. That's me. Brown hair doesn't scan with this type of laser scanner, so I'm wearing a stocking cap. Here's some guys that when I was working with the Discovery Channel, we scanned them, and after way too much of whatever we were drinking that day at the scanner, I've got my body scanned a million times over for all the different research that we do at our lab. And so it does a lot of things. Okay, you can 3D print, obviously, unique stuff, like dental parts. This is the way 97% of dental stuff is done. Or a surgeon can go in and know exactly what they're getting into with this shattered pelvis before they're in it. They three-dimensionally print it, and they know everything about it before the skin is cut. That can't be done before. You know, you have a physical instantiation of something that exists inside the body before you even go there. Or this soccer shoe by Prior to Lever. This is based on the underside of the soccer player's foot, or football player, they're British. So it's a perfect fit. You know, it's the ultimate perfect fit. It was 3D printed based on the person's body. Here's some interesting stuff that just came out this year from a group called Continuum. They are looking at mesh, at complex interwoven mesh structures that are 3D printed because you can print complex meshes. What they debuted with was a bikini, and kind of a neat idea conceptually. It got a lot of press for obvious reasons. The thing to remember, though, is that 3D printed stuff has about the texture of 120 grit sandpaper. So, you know, lest you buy stock in their company. Materialize is doing all kinds of interesting stuff with 3D printing for fashion. And it's the boon for the fashion world, thinking, okay, now you can really push your imagination much, much farther than you could before and instantiate whatever you dream up. Here's a weird one. Increase complexity to reduce cost. Because when you're 3D printing something, you're paying by the volume, by the amount of material you're using. Usually complexity comes by what you're not printing. So if this were a bagel-shaped thing, it would cost a lot more than this very complex hollow trabecular structure. This is Bathsheba Grossman out of Santa Cruz. She's a mathematician from MIT. Does brilliant sculptures like this. Or this by Nervous System. Amazing shapes we could never have imagined before. Or fractals, models of all kinds that just could never have been seen or imagined any other way. So this is Theo Jansen, I'm sure everyone knows. Here's another cool thing about 3D printing is that because complexity is free, you can print the entire mechanism. You know, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this. But I really wanted a sand beast, you know, and I can't get a sand beast. That's a big, big, fancy, expensive thing. So I can go on Shapeways and just order my own. So I brought that up here, and this is essentially a sand beast from Theo Jansen. And it has, you know, what, 100 moving parts in it, something like that. And it was printed, it came out of the machine exactly like this, as a complex, never assembled moving part, or moving complex assembly ready to go. Here's a weird thing, try this. Start a product company with no upfront cost. And that, I think, is one of the especially exciting things for any student going out into the world today. This is an option that you might consider. And so here's the way I'll frame this. If you were to get this lamp from Artemide, it would be really safe. You know, that's a very safe lamp. Artemide can only do safe because they have huge upfront costs. They'd better do safe because they have to recover their costs. They have lots of trips to China that they have to do to debug the tools, to fix the tools, to work with the manufacturers, set up the assembly line, all this stuff. It's a lot of work that goes into it. They have a lot of steel tools that get cut. So their upfront costs are so high, they had better sell a lot of product before they can hit their break even. So they better hit the high part of the bell curve. Now compare that to Freedom of Creation out of Amsterdam. It's this guy, Janne Kittonen, and he creates these amazing lamps with his friends. Beautiful, complex structures. Their upfront cost is a bunch of ones and zeros. If nobody buys their lamps, they lose a bunch of ones and zeros. That's it. It's a totally different business model. So what it's done, I think most importantly, is it's democratized creativity. It means that they are not penalized for creativity, which the rest of us quietly are. If you're creative and you fail, that's really bad. Well, in these guys' case, if you're creative and you fail, you've lost nothing. Keep trying, see what happens. You know, what's the worst that can happen? So that's kind of an exciting new twist for the way you make stuff. What I think that's done, though, is it really means kind of the inmates are guarding the asylum now. You know, it means that we are all, instead of designers now competing against just other trained designers, we're competing against the entire world. There could be some guy in Mumbai, who came up with a really cool idea, put on Shapeways, and that's your competition now. It's no longer just these established professional designers competing with each other. So it's a very different landscape for the designer entering the world now. We also have this new idea where the end user can become a part of the process. In this case, okay, we're on auto advance. In this case, you can go onto the nervous system's website, use their, it's called processing code, modify the attractors over there on the right any way you like, and three-dimensionally print the result. So you can make your own completely custom thing in as much time as you want to spend on it, 5 minutes or an hour, and print it and have it sent to you. And it's a cool thing. Here's a ring, a stainless steel ring that was made this way. And it's guaranteed to be unlike any other. And that's, they're taking advantage of everything, of the idea that you can't, they don't make identical products, but they can actually involve the user because the user can be a participatory part of the process. Work from Bathsheba Grossman, sculptor here out of Santa Cruz, doing amazing stuff. But also the barrier to entry for things like jewelry. This has come way down. It used to be that you had to go to jewelry design school to be a jeweler. Now you download Rhino Jewel, and you come up with your designs, 3D print your wax, you're ready to go. You can, it's all object-oriented, very easy to make whatever garish thing you can make, whatever this thing is, and get it cast, and bam, you're a jewelry designer. So it's democratized things, it's opened up the floodgates, good or bad, that's to be discussed, but it means that it is, again, a very different landscape for the industrial designer leaving today. Optimization, I think, is especially exciting because in the world that we live in now, we're living in a very suboptimal world structurally. It doesn't matter for the most part. We just overkill things and we're all fine with it. But that's not the way nature does things. Nature works on performance, feedback, and revision. So here's the way we do things, big and clumsy and overbuilt. Here's the way nature does things, a lot more sophisticated, a lot more advanced, a lot more complex. Biomimicry is kind of the general theme we're talking about here. Nature would not create a big block like this. In this case, it's a tube that goes up, bifurcates, and bends 90 degrees, big block of steel there. That's not what nature would do. It's not efficient, it's not optimized in any way. Nature would create something a lot more along the lines of what happens when you're at Kentucky Fried Chicken and you crack open one of those bones and you look inside. You get a very complex, very beautiful structure. So there are now softwares. This one is created by a group out of London called Within. And their website's worth checking out, within-labs.com. You load up your preconditions, you run it, and it creates your highly optimized structure. And the result is just pretty much the way nature would have ended up as well. It can only be 3D printed, of course, because you've created an inherently very complex structure as well. But you're able to think in very different terms from manufacturing. Here's another example, a different company called Solid Thinking, Morphogenesis. You design the outer bounds of what you're going to be creating, You load it up with your finite element model, and it designs your part for you. And it's a highly optimized part, just the way nature would have created it. Then you can go and use that as an underlay template, because now you know that that's a very optimized structure, very idealized structure, and there's your result. You know, if you as a designer decide to make it that way. Here's something that we did at our lab at Bespoke. This weighs 3 times as much as a ping pong ball. It's the size of half a softball, and I can stand on it. It'll support my 200 pounds. That's weird. You know, that defies typical physics. You know, we get amazed when we can do this stuff because we're creating this just like the way nature would. This is essentially a bone structure that we're creating in 3 dimensions. Here's another piece if you want to come up after and check it out. It's obscenely strong for being a very, very lightweight, very thin, hollow part. Again, stuff you could never have made 5 or 10 years ago. Now you can make it, and this is a final part that is going to have some uses with the body. This is one of the things I think is exciting. You can see things you haven't seen before. Things like motion. You know, we know it's there. It has energy. It's some combination of time, energy, displacement, volume, all these things. But you can't turn it into physical unless you have some of these complex tools. In this case, this is a dove taking off from a roost or landing, I don't know which. And there is no dove in it. This is the displacement of the cross-section through space over time. And so you're looking at 3 things simultaneously that would have no physical instantiation otherwise. Or in this case, a moth circling a flame. It's a cross-section of a moth that all we're ever looking at is the displacement of the moth through air. And this is a lamp diffuser, which I think is an especially appropriate conceptual design. But it all kind of goes back to what Muybridge, I think, was doing a century ago, looking at a new way of looking at motion, time, and physical form. I don't really know what the purpose of being able to instantiate a moth flying around a flame is, but there's something just compelling, I think, and really exciting about it, and it'll be fascinating to see what happens. A lot of people here know Lisa Iwamoto, amazing architect. Again, very complex architecture, could never be physically instantiated, except that it can be 3D printed very easily because it was created digitally. Or this group, Zephyrotark. They do crazy, wild, imaginative stuff. And the cool thing is now you can actually physically see what it is. It probably won't ever get built, but this is as close as we'll come. You can 3D print it. Okay, election year here. This is the one technology that makes everyone happy. Go figure. It's made in the US because it would be more expensive to make it anywhere but the US. You know, when was the last time you heard that? It is almost trivial power consumption to create the parts that we create. You know, one of these legs costs less power than using your dishwasher once. You know, when we wash it after it's created, we're using more electricity than creating it in the first place. That doesn't happen in the real world. That's how weird things are. It's a recyclable. We curbside recycle everything. Gets a number 7 on it. And there's almost no waste compared to injection molding and all the other traditional processes. This is a no waste process. So go figure. You know, the right and the left love this. Self-replication. This is especially weird, but kind of compelling too. RepRap here. They make a 3-dimensional printer, but it makes other 3-dimensional printers. So you get one for yourself and you print one for mom. You know, how cool is that? They do it partly to be ironic. It's not a super high quality printer, but it's this great kind of poetic concept of these things proliferating because they're making themselves. This is nature in a weird way. The big fancy $800,000 machines like this one, kind that we use, they do the same. And they're not doing it to be ironic, but EOS here only sells 300 to 500 units a year. They would never be able to make up the money injection molding their parts. So here's a part from an EOS P730. It's pipe clamp. They have 40% of the machine is printed on a machine. So the machine is printing itself. It's this weird thing like that. And we all know, of course, how that story ends. You know, pretty soon we are expendable. So here's list number 2. That was the first line. List number 2. Things you can do by tomorrow morning. And this always kind of amazes me, but it's true. 3-dimensional scanning. It used to be that this was a really fancy thing, a lot of money, and only magicians could do it. It used to be crazy. You know, the machines that I was using 5 years ago were $1 million machines, and you had to have a degree to touch these things. You can do it by tomorrow morning as every bit as well. 123D Catch was announced a couple weeks ago by Autodesk. You can basically three-dimensionally scan highly accurate parts. They have some rules that the parts have to follow, but your 3D scan is as good as a $1 million machine was 5 years ago. The cool thing about it is that your scanning device you already have. You know, this is the scanning device I used yesterday, and I got great results. And the cost to use their service is free. Autodesk loaded it to the cloud, and it's a free service. So now it went from $1 million process and machine to being something you can do in minutes. That's the kind of disruptive, weird stuff we're in now. The other thing I think is exciting, you can start your own company. By tomorrow morning, you can start a product company. And that is a company called Shapeways. And Pinocchio just got into the game as well. You can log on, upload your whatever this thing is. If people like it, they'll buy it. You put on your margin for it, and you get some pocket money by morning. I do this when I do lectures a lot of times. I'm doing one this weekend, and so I decided, well, I'll just print them a bracelet based on their logo. So 3D printed out of stainless steel, and it costs $48 to print this bracelet. And if 50 people in the conference buy it for $100, I make beer money. You know, how cool is that? A ring this big from Shapeways, or from Nervous System, I happen to know costs $10 for them to make. So if you want to make your own cool ring company, $10 a piece, and if you can sell it for $50, you're in business. And your upfront cost, again, zero. Your risk, zero. It's all cake. So it's a totally different way of doing business. So okay, here's the third of the list. 3 trends to keep an eye on. These are the things that are really going to be crazy exciting as time goes on. 3D print your house. This is a couple years out, but I'll say not more than 5. That there's a guy, Barak Kushneves, down at UCLA who's working on this. You can parametrically model your house as though you're at IKEA working on your kitchen configurator, design it the way you would with any 3D CAD parametrically, and then when you're ready to print it, roll in a gantry and it 3D-dimensionally prints. It's a company called Contour Crafting. And it should print in about 3 days. Any complexity, it tends to favor vaulted roofs, obviously, because when you start doing a cantilevered roof, it doesn't like it because it's printing it layer by layer. Which means that your world is going to start looking like Santorini. You know, it's not the end of the world. Santorini was done the old school way, but just for reference. Another company out of Italy doing this with a matrix of marble and some polymer. They don't really give examples, but they're working on large-scale physical structure production. This is probably the way things are going to be printed in space, on the moon or Mars. And NASA is working really hard at this, which takes us to 3D printing in space. This is going to be a really exciting area. A group I work with out of Singularity University is called Made in Space. And they kind of built their company off this lecture I gave 2 years ago, and they said, hey, can you 3D-dimensionally print in space? And so we had a lot of beers and discussed it, and after like beer 9, we said, yes, we can 3D print in space, we can do it, let's do it. And they said, what's the next step? And I said, well, get on the Vomit Comet, the parabolic flight, zero-gravity flight simulator, and get a printer up there. And so we called Autodesk and said, do you want to bankroll it? And they kind of said, well, sure. And then we called up 3D Systems and said, hey, you guys want to give us a free printer? And they said, well, yeah, okay, sure. So we got these guys up into space, and 2 amazing things happened. It worked. The 3D printer works in zero gravity. This is an example. This was printed in zero gravity. It's one of the first things ever printed in zero gravity, and it's every bit as good as what would be created here on the land. We've done scanning electron microscope tests of it, perfect laminar structure. So go figure, you can 3D print in space. The other amazing thing is they did not throw up on the equipment, which we all had bets going. You know, it's like 9-to-1 that they would, and they actually kept it down, which is completely in defiance of biology. Their goal is to 3D print space stations and spacecraft. And we are now targeted to have a machine, a 3D printer, on the space station. I think that's going to be at the end of the year. So it will be on one of the next space flights. And then the weird one here, 3D print living tissue. This is a huge multi-hour talk on its own, but this is happening. It's already being done. They're printing a rat's heart, I think it was what I heard that yesterday. Kidneys, bladders, livers, skin. There's a guy I'm working with in Berkeley, and he wants to print an entire living human leg. that you can simply sew on, attach the capillary structures, and you're good to go. That's not all that far off. And he assures me that it's actually totally viable. But it's a topic that, that is longer than one can dive into right here, especially with my lack of any biology background whatsoever. So that's the premise for, for all of the 3D printing stuff that we do. It's a fascinating new world. So where we've taken this is how to connect this back around to human needs in the body, because again, an industrial designer, I don't want to just create a widget and have it out there. I want to have it solve a real problem and fix somebody's life in whatever way it needs fixing. So Bespoke, it's a work in progress, as you can tell. We're located up by the Globe restaurant in Bix, surrounded by people who wear suits every day. The thing that we went after was the prosthetic leg, thinking, okay, here's this great feat of modern engineering. However, it's creepy. It looks like it was designed by an engineer because it was designed by an engineer. It looks more like something that should be under an aircraft, I tend to think, than on a human body. It looks completely out of context, in my feel, from the human. This is the most important thing in somebody's life. This gives them their mobility and their ability to function. And it still looks like vacuum cleaner parts, you know, who dropped the ball. So, you know, my kind of mental metaphor is it's kind of like if you went to the dealership and you said, hey, I want one of those, and then they rolled out this. And you're saying, well, yeah. And I said, you know, this is what I want. They said, well, that's what you got. What do you mean? What's the difference? So, you know, that's kind of engineer mentality, I tend to think. You know, that they don't see that there's more to it. There's an emotive value that an industrial designer sees that is sacred and is paramount in somebody's life. So we came up with a process. Let's see if this process works. This was an experiment. You know, I did a lot of experimenting, living up in the mountains and scanning people and trying to see what happens. This is a simulation. It's not a real, whoa. This is a simulation of how we do it, but we start by three-dimensionally scanning the person's, both of their legs. I'm going to be doing this all day tomorrow down at Balboa Naval Center. Scanning both their legs, their prosthetic and the real, called the sound side. And then to give them their shape back, now it's digital, you can mirror their sound side leg, the surviving leg, over the prosthetic. And no matter what, you've got something unique. You know, it's as unique as their fingerprint, as their body, as their own DNA. And whatever comes out of that, here's what it tends to look like once scanned. Whatever comes out of it from that moment forward is unique. It's custom tailored to them, but also it represents their symmetry. You know, something as what I tend to think is sacred as body symmetry. So here's the first guy I tried. He lost his leg right off the pier there in Donner Lake in a water ski accident involving a propeller. And so you can see, okay, recreating his symmetry, but also to kind of really connect it to his psyche. We took his old leather jacket, his old bomber jacket that he had for 10 years, and sliced it up with an X-Acto and used that to give it the skin and the shape, you can see, of the leather, and recreated his tattoo that he always had, again, to kind of connect him emotionally with what will be a part of his body. Down right at the Achilles heel, you can barely see it, but is a number 7 recycling symbol, because it is curbside recyclable. And when you see the before and after, when you see what it looks like without this, we call it the fairing, after the motorcycle parts, the part that gives the motorcycle its sex appeal in its form, all of a sudden this seems like, yeah, it's not apologetic about his condition. It's not pretending to be something it isn't. It's not trying to be flesh and blood. It's trying to be something sculptural, something that enhances the body. This is John Siciliano. You've seen him on TV. He's the guy that you've seen in any war movie who, you know, swords or Vietnam or World War I, you name it. He's the guy running across the field and gets his leg blown off and then writhes in pain. That's not a special effect. He never had it. And he took courses in writhing in pain. And he makes a fortune as the guy who writhes in pain after his leg gets blown off in a movie. And he's done that countless times, so you've seen him on TV. So this was the idea of saying, okay, can you make a leg that's so cool that he's psyched to wear it, instead of something that begs to be covered up and almost apologizes for itself. So one of the things that you'll notice is that he has replaceable fairings. That's cowboy boot leather, tooled boot leather there on the bottom. And that's top-stitched brown veg tan leather. The idea of saying, hey, why not be able to swap out your appearance, part of your physicality, Just give him a little dividend that the rest of us don't have. When his girlfriend saw this, she came down to our photo shoot. She's like, wow, I like that leg better than that leg. And it's kind of weird and kind of creepy to hear that. And he's kind of thinking about it. It's like, people don't say that. It's just, you don't hear that as an amputee. And so that was kind of this moment of truth for me of saying, okay, yeah, that's cool to be able to make that mental switch. Oh, and then she asked me, she's like, can I have one? What do you mean? It's like, yeah, it's going to hurt. This guy, James, motorcycle crash, as yes, all the motorcycle riders, myself included, we know this is our future. So notice the forearm. He's got a tattoo on his forearm. Recreated that, debossed into his fairing, and took the colors. He said, how much can you connect me to my Harley? That was his demise, but it's still a big part of his life. So the thing that was kind of fun about that was that, at first glance, you can't really tell where James stops and the Harley starts. It almost looks like the leg is this bridge that aesthetically connects one to the other, that is some DNA of both Harley and James. And so all of a sudden, he's wearing his shorts on his Harley, which is the stupidest thing anyone can do, but it's kind of fun. And there's the look of me and the photographer, I guess, in the crankcase, but just connecting the two. Here's James. He lost his leg to, Chad. He lost his leg to cancer. We hired him now. He's working with us. You can't play soccer. He was a competitive soccer player. You can't play soccer if you've got this titanium pipe there, because the ball's going to ricochet any way it wants. So, and also if somebody kicks you, they're going to break their toes. So he was kind of not welcomed on the field, and he wasn't a good player. So 3D scanned his leg, printed this, and aesthetically I wanted it to just look like sports equipment. Nothing embellished, just like you pulled it right out of the gym bag. The fenestration pattern there was to really deaden impact. So when the ball hits it, it'll stop. It won't go bouncing away. He can actually trap it, and it deadens the ball like human tissue does. And it's plenty strong. Again, this isn't the load-bearing part, but this surrounds the prosthetic that's underneath it. And part of the fenestration there, the holes that you see, the pattern, is to make sure that we're never trying to hide something. We're never trying to say this is the leg, and we're never trying to say, hey, we're apologizing for what's underneath. We're showing it. The whole idea is just to say, hey, if we surround it with something really cool, maybe it's not so bad. We made him another leg just for walking around town. But again, then the leather was starting to look like, this leather I wanted to use was looking a little too human. So I said, okay, we'll just deboss this badge, 3D print it, metalize it, and just to make sure that we're really announcing clearly that we're not trying to be human. We're not trying to fool anyone. This is unapologetically man-made. So then Deborah, this isn't Deborah. We started talking, and I was saying, well, what do you like? And art, taste, cars, fashion, anything, to kind of elicit what she is. So finally she says, hey, have you seen these posters for this movie, this just total crap movie, Save Your $7? It's the poster's the only good thing about it, but it was, hey, she said, can you make me a sexy robot? She says, I feel like a sexy cyborg. That's what I want to do. I want to look like. And so that's the dream challenge of any industrial designer. Make a sexy cyborg? Yeah, that's why I went to school. So the first thing was to kind of look at patterns, and there are certain rules to 3D printing and coming up with a pattern that would print. And so that was the pattern was created. We, again, scanned her, 3D printed the metal back, printed the lace, and this is the first time lace actually defines the body instead of the body giving shape to the lace. It's kind of this little reverse that gets played. And you can see daylight through it, of course. Here's another one. This is we decided to knock off Chanel. So we've got the Chanel leather, the quilted leather, and the polished chrome, or polished nickel, actually. But it's this idea of saying, yeah, here's a girl who hadn't worn a skirt in 8 years. And all of a sudden, she's coming to our studio in these really badly fitting skirts that she just bought the day before. And and some people are like, wow, big victory, you got a girl to wear a skirt. It's like, yeah, no, there's something more than that. She's out going to the symphony now, and she can't wait to show people. So all of a sudden, she's got knee-length skirts all over the place so she can show this off. That's that signifies to us a fairly important change in how we impacted her life and how she now sees her body, which is just, I think, really important. The nice thing also is she can cover it up, which she does when she doesn't want to attract attention. And because it's such a perfect conformal representation of her original shape, it's pretty undetectable over just dark stockings. There she is actually on my motorcycle because she totaled hers when she lost her leg. But we did a plain badass black front as well. So she can use the same chrome back and she can swap out as many fronts. I think we made like 5 fronts for her. And then just for the fun of it, we also did a laser tattooed leather front. And just to see if that was possible. So we went over to Tech Shop and laser tattooed some leather. Stop that. And so found out that, yeah, that's possible. Again, just to kind of give her something that's personal. And how cool it would be to be able to swap out your tattoos from one day to the next. This is for a woman, Sarah Reinertsen, who was in The Great Race. And she's going to be wearing this on the runway in LA in a few weeks. A guy in Germany that we're working with, he had kind of just classic timeless taste. You know, just good taste in everything from his watch to his shoes to everything. So decided to use like herringbone. You know, that's a classic timeless. And so that's the design of it. That's computer model. But here is the 3D printed version. You know, metallized, perforated herringbone and then debossed in the front. There's a close-up of it. You can see kind of the finish quality that you get with the polished nickel-plated polymer and then the straight-up tumbled polymer. And then Uwe here also on that German trip, he was all too proud to show his tats. You know, it's like, wow, that's creepy tats. So we recreated his tats in the leather and sent him the computer model and, you know, what do you think of this? And he liked it. And so then we made him his leg with his tats and actually debossed it in the back so that he would have his pattern. Again, to emotionally, psychologically connect him with his body, with what now will be a part of his body, and let him express himself then through it. Again, laser tattooed his own tats back onto his leg. And so tattoos I think are especially interesting in this one. This is a guy I actually chased down on Hayes Street and got his tats and then recreated them for this guy. This is, you know, again, it's kind of weird because this is a tattoo defining the shape of the body as opposed to the body being adorned by the tattoo. I think there's just this kind of interesting little twist in things. There's some more shots. Again, the idea is that here's a sculpture that's free-floating above his body. And it's kind of, the idea is to pay homage, to pay tribute to what was there without trying to recreate it. And so what we try to do with the fairing design is really to capture an emotion, in this case speed and adrenaline. How do you capture that? Or in this case kind of bling and attitude, you know, for a bike passenger. How do you capture that in a shape? How do you embody that person and give them their own personality back? How do you recreate that? It's a weird one. You know, that's the big challenge of mass customization, because you do it wrong and you're very patronizing. You're not really respecting the person. Here's a guy, another guy from Germany. He wanted to look like his GTI, and so we took some of the visual cues, some of the themes from his GTI, the hex pattern from the grille, and the dot pattern from the steering wheel and the leather seating. And he's bilateral, so we actually had to scan his friend who was a similar height and build, and let him be a body morphology donor, is what we call it. And so, yeah, another view of it. And the materials work out because they're almost GTI-like. So that is kind of what we do now, and we're doing a lot of people like that, people of all kinds, and you know, soldiers, of course, and a handful of models and things like that. This all actually started, I'm kind of going back now and preceding the whole thing. This is where it started, with this vision that I had 5 years ago when I was teaching Carnegie Mellon, was just kind of throwing this idea out of saying, is there any way that I'd be able to fly over to Cambodia with nothing more than a camera and change somebody's life? You know, a camera and maybe a laptop, and create a leg that could really change somebody's life. And if you could do that, then it could spread virally, and you could release this seed into the world where you could create legs for people. So that was really the impetus. And so I spent a year and a half up in the mountains, you know, secluded in a cabin designing these things. So pursuing that and finding out ultimately that no, I can't. You know, which is, but in the meantime, it was a really fascinating experiment. So the idea behind that is still sound. It's going to happen. It's only stopped by economics now, unfortunately. But the mechanics and the physics of it all do work. The idea is you can three-dimensionally scan somebody, run it through a parametric template, and three-dimensionally print something that is based on them, that gives them their body symmetry back. Now, in a lot of the developing countries, what that also means, the other quiet dividends, are that it is theft-proof, because it can't be disassembled. All the parts are printed in one shot. So your extrinsic value goes down, your intrinsic value therefore goes up. It's as if somebody does steal it, what are they going to do with it? It was designed for that one person only. You can design all the complexity you want into it. So for example, this leg has a 7-bar linkage knee, which is by itself $10,000 in the US, just that part. And a foot that has a ball and socket, and a calf muscle that's calibrated like a spring so that when the foot goes up, the calf muscle deforms and gives it spring back. Okay, that's another $10,000 in the US market. So this would be about $60,000 worth of leg if you were to get it on the open market in the US. You can print it for $4,000. It's also far lighter. It's about half the weight of a traditional prosthetic because, again, back to the trabecular structure, it's hollow. It's about 2 millimeter wall, very, very thin wall. There's a lattice structure inside, just like there is on a human bone or a bird bone. So it makes it very strong, very light, but still you're recreating the person's shape. And so what you're also doing is addressing some of the stigma in the developing world around prosthetics, where somebody's not then seen as necessarily somebody with this creepy thing that they're walking around with, but maybe something that people find really cool. Or if they would like to hide it, you can hide it under pants and it goes away because it's recreating the person's shape fairly exactly. So it's all those things that are kind of little hidden dividends that go with it. What else? It's also dishwasher safe. Go figure. There's something kind of cool about saying, yeah, you can wash yourself. Yeah, you can throw this in the dishwasher. It's fine. To create this, 36 hours to print it, again, uses as much electricity as your dishwasher. Run once. So I put this on John, walked around a different one. This one's actually fused, so it doesn't walk. And the idea is now you actually can. You can go to developing countries now with nothing more than a camera and scan a person, run it through a parametric template, and you can print it. The downside is $4,000. Right now, that's still prohibitively expensive. So everything's on hold until things change there. Here's another version. This is like the classic art school result of you have to do the hubless wheel there. If you can't look through the hub, you've really done something wrong with art school. We hiked all over Tahoe with this, and it was great. It finally broke in the foot, and you can actually see the fracture up in the middle of the foot there. But up until then, he said it was the best leg he's ever had. Downside is, yeah, it cracked. He went for a tumble. So the thing that I think is just exciting is we're now in we have all these new tools in the sandbox, and it's really up to the designers to figure out, okay, now how do you connect these with the human needs? There's so many human needs, so many unmet things that we can address. It's not going to be the engineers, and it's not going to be the marketing people or the MBAs. They're not going to connect the dots. This is kind of the land now of the industrial designers and the creatives. We've got the tools and we've got all the drive, and we're the only ones who really, I think, see the problems and the opportunities to fix and to address people's lives or the challenges that some people have. So, the burden is on us to really connect the dots and make it all happen. So thank you very much. I've got a ton of parts up here. After, feel free to come up and check them out. I'd pass them around, but I keep losing parts that way.
I'm just curious, on the metal ones, do you have to polish how do you get the 3D prints?
So the question is, how do you get the nice polished metal? I was giving away a trade secret here, so don't kill my business for it. But, yeah, exactly. And I won't stream it in 2 weeks. We 3D print the parts using a company called 3D Systems, or the innovator of the technology. It's a stereolithography process, so it's liquid-based. It's negatively ionic. It attracts copper. The copper is deposited on it with an ionic bond, and the nickel is attracted to the copper, and then they buff it. So all I do is I send a part file out, and I say, polish this to 600 grit, wet sanded, send it to Repliform in Baltimore. I tell Repliform, hey, a part's coming in, it's going to be another leg. They say, okay. And then I say, all the exterior surfaces, mirror finish. And a week later, I get it, 2 weeks later.
The interior is nylon?
The interior is nylon, but you could actually put this in an oven, boil out or heat up melt out the polymer. Actually, it's not nylon; it's photopolymer. You could melt out the photopolymer, and it would be plenty strong just as a hollow structure, because now all the metal is doing all the strength. It's got a pretty hardy dose of nickel that's wrapping it. Nickel is impervious to anything.
Can I ask you, like, what is the typical leg cost for a client?
Well, that's one of the challenges we have as a company. For a basic leg like the soccer leg, where it's all one material, it's just the polymer straight out of the machine, that's $4,000, and we're certainly not making a healthy profit on that. For all bells and whistles, leather and metal and things like that, $6,000, and I don't know if we're even making any margin on that. So it's probably not this itself isn't the best business model. If anyone's thinking, hey, this is my opportunity. As a company, we're going into a lot of different areas, and most of it I can't say. This is the trailer, the movie's ahead, but we're going into just a really broad range of human needs, and this is kind of the same theme that we're applying. This is just one of the areas that we're applying it.
The white prosthesis that you have there, is it all of the mechanical structure as well as the...
Yeah, the question is the white leg here, is it the appearance and the load-bearing components? And yeah, it's a cock structure. So when it comes out of the machine and the dust is evacuated, it's ready to walk. It has 8 moving parts in it. You can't see 3 of them. They're invisible because they're inside the machine or inside the mechanism of the knee. But it is fully load-bearing and it's fully ready to walk.
Can you embed other materials inside? I mean, like that you showed the foot being broken. I'm wondering if an embedded metal piece there would have prevented that.
Yeah, the question is, can you embed other materials in? I don't know. Possibly. I'm looking at different ways that I might be able to load bearings in, and I've done that on a couple of them. We load ceramic ball bearings in, so it's still dishwasher safe, but the friction and the heat go down. So there's certainly tricks you can do with these hybrid processes where you take the overall material, you load it with something, you do something else. And we're working with the government now on some really, really crazy stuff that is just mind-boggling as far as mixing this material in this way, and this and that, and you get some crazy results. So this is totally untapped territory, and it's all make it up as you go along land. Mm-hmm.
So like if you're 3D printing parts that are interior that you can't see and that's part bricks, seems like that's like
kind of a showstopper.
Fairly risky, yeah. So
yeah, it's like blowing a piston.
What kind of like, how are you addressing that, and how are there ways to fix this polymer, or is it once it's set? Are there like glues, or like what do you do if you're on a hike and that bridge cracks?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is one of the challenges that we found out after making this is that it's like a unibody car. Once the frame's bent, the whole thing's shot. The same kind of thing. Once you have a critical fracture, critical breakdown, it's pretty much done. There isn't really repair. So yeah, that is one of the shortcomings. The whole trick is just to over-engineer it, to build your overage in your FEA so much that it's a less of an issue. But it's to be determined if you can actually get it to the point where it is. The irony, though, of all things, is that the more you throw it in the dishwasher, the better the material properties get. Go figure. But you throw this in the washing machine or the dishwasher, you soak it every couple of days, and your material properties stay fantastic for years. Nobody knows why. It's just weird.
It seems like on the beginning you have these ones that you're calling the fairings, where there's an existing structure that you don't make, right? But some of these ones here look like the internal structure is also crafted at the same time or added onto? Or
yeah, the question was the difference between a fairing and a monocoque. The fairing this is the afterthought. This is something that we do now. It's marketable. It surrounds an existing FDA-approved hardware set. And it is based on creating fashion, design, and body symmetry, but using the existing hardware set, not reinventing that wheel. This is the original idea, was to say, hey, can I just print the entire thing? It's probably possible. It just needs more development. And this one, same deal. It's kind of in development stage. These are kind of the farther out R&D that I hope to get to.
Are the hinges and stuff on the knee, is that all also printed, or is that machine? It looks like there's some...
on this one, it's all printed. On this one, it's a combination. This is a standard issue military knee inside here, a piston dampener, gas dampener, and then I machined up a a surround for it because I just didn't like how clumsy theirs was. But this is a hybrid of existing off-the-shelf parts, like that knee, and the rest of it bolting into what gives it the person's body. So it's kind of like you took the body, hollowed it out, and stuck a piston in there, and that's what you get. And people are free to come up and check this out.
So the monocoque requires FDA approval and the fairings don't?
Right. The FDA is pretty indifferent to the fairings. The FDA is very concerned about this. It's still class 1, which is the important one. It means that the FDA isn't all that concerned, but it does mean that it's a very different FDA regulation that we have to deal with, which is never fun if anyone's ever dealt with the FDA. Mm-hmm.
So why are you doing this? I mean,
Which,
personally.
Oh, why am I doing this?
Why are you doing this? I mean, I know you have this expertise in the 3D printing field, but why are you in this product?
That's a really good question. This is something that is, I'm really drawn to all of the different aspects of this, in the sense that there's an opportunity potentially to send something out into the world that can impact millions of people. I hope to get there with this one. That you can release that into the world as freeware, as a $5 iPhone app or iPad app, and let that out in the world and let people create their own legs. That would be amazing. Right now it's too expensive to print, but the rest of it's totally possible. I get really excited by that, of solving a major world problem. When I think of all the people in Iraq and in Africa and everywhere else who've lost their legs, it's really, really tragic. And the access to good medicine is very gated in much of the world. So that excites me. But also when you look at what an industrial designer, the kind of art end of an industrial designer is to create something really, really beautiful and really sculptural. I love being able to do that. And there's something exciting about taking somebody's body and using that as your template. And every couple of days you get a new body to work with. And it might be heavy-set, elderly, athletic, soldier, young, old, anything. It's just kind of an exciting new template to work with. So tomorrow I'm going to be down at the military base and I've got a couple soldiers lined up. And you get to find out about their personalities, what they're like, what they think like, and then design something custom tailored to that person. That to me is really exciting. It's a crazy challenge because you're trying to design one thing per person. It's really, really difficult. And it's a weird challenge. And you're trying to kind of capture that person's personality. But it's an exciting challenge. It's a weird one. And it's also, there's something so satisfying about creating these things where each one is its own unique sculpture. And it'll be totally unlike the one you do the next day. So that's what gets me excited. Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about the social implications of the product?
The questions about the social implications. I think a lot. And that's one of my big drivers is the social implications. And one of the main ones is to change the way we see prosthetics. And I kind of think of it, the metaphor would be eyewear. If you left glasses, optical glasses, eyewear, corrective lenses, to be designed by medical engineers, do you think anyone would actually wear them? People would willingly walk into walls not to wear something designed by a biomedical engineer. They wouldn't hesitate. I have no doubt in my mind. The fact is that that's not the case. Eyewear is designed by some of the best designers in the world. And that's why more glasses are sold without a prescription than with, but you didn't know that. And that people wear it because they like what it does for them. They wear it simply as jewelry. To me, that's a weird full circle. It's corrective. It should be something that somebody's almost embarrassed about under other circumstances, but because of the design, and only because of the design, it's actually come and become part of jewelry. For some reason, prosthetics didn't go through that same evolutionary path. They stalled out at Maslow's bottom rung of purely functional. And I'm thinking there's got to be a Maslow's hierarchy that you can get higher up and you say, okay, why can't we give personal expression, personal body form, uniqueness, the fingerprint mentality? Why can't we put all that into it so that it's not just this kind of unwanted house guest that never left for the person, but it's something that they get stoked to wear and show off to the world? When we can change that, it changes their relationship with the world around, but also changes the way the world sees an amputee. And a lot of the celebrity amputees out there now, they really are doing that. They're changing it rapidly. And I'm working with them, and it's really exciting because we're all kind of sharing ideas on how we can kind of combine and change how the world sees amputees. It's not disability. It's not something that inspires pity. Maybe it excites. maybe it fires up the imagination. That's a very, very different, a different perspective to have on it.
Are you working with Amy Mullins at all?
Yeah. The question, am I working with Amy Mullins? Yeah, she's a good friend. And she was the actually original inspiration. I met her, I guess, 15 years ago at an Aspen Design Conference when she was just a kid and she was doing some of her first talks. And I was looking at this leg, and she had one that was kind of beige plastic and looked almost human, and the other looked like Total Robocop with springs everywhere. It's like, wow, how come no industrial designer ever had to go at this? Here's this woman, the top 3/4 of her is stunningly gorgeous. The bottom is just, what the fuck? It's like such a disconnect. And she's so effervescent. She has so much life and so much personality. And so yeah, I kind of kicked that off. And now it's kind of fun because I go out and visit her in New York all the time. We're working on some legs for her. And it's funny because Amy Mullins is this kind of great celebrity. She's in the 2012 Olympics. She's the cover girl for whatever now, some big thing that she's a cover girl for. But she left her own devices. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, something like that. But when we sit down next to each other, we have the exact same lower leg. It's like, Amy, I'm 6'4". You're not 6'4", but we've got the exact same lower leg length. This crazy thing. But she just wants to be taller sometimes, so she can. She's a double amputee, so she gets to choose her height from one day to the next. I was like, that's just really cool. And so one of the challenges that we have with her is that she's a double amputee. She's missing both legs, so we can't scan the sound side leg and mirror it over. So I've been trying to find somebody who can be the surrogate, the stand-in for her, so to speak. And so when I'm walking down the street, I'm always looking for someone with these really tall, crazy long tibias with perfect calves, because she's a Olympic level runner. And so it pisses off my girlfriend every time. Like, what are you looking at? Legs. She's got great legs. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm allowed to. This pays our bills. But yeah, great stories with Amy. She's a really great person. And then Amy Purdy is another one. She's just cool as anything. Sarah Reinertson is there. John Siciliano. There are a handful of these people, and they're really kind of the great mouthpieces for the industry, and they're such great personality. Oh, and Chad Crittenden, who works with us. He was on Survivor and all this thing. Yeah, and it's really inspiring to work with people like that. One of the things with Chad that I thought was really exciting is when he was late for one of our meetings about a year ago, and he called up and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just looking for parking." And I'm in the window. I'm like, "Chad, there's a blue spot right out front. There's a handicap." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't use those things." What do you mean? You're looking for parking. You don't have a leg. You're allowed to use the handicap spot. Of all people who should, And he's like, no, I'll save that for someone else. It's like, wow, that's cool. That's and you just like all the people we get to work with are really pretty amazing people.
Have you done any for children, and does it implicate any different problems?
The question is, have we done any for children? The trick with children, I would love to. We haven't had anyone call us yet. Children don't have the disposable income, and it's unfortunate, and I would love it if a charity wanted to bankroll us, because I would love to work with kids. The other downside is children are growing, so if you have something that's static, this just can't grow with them. So they're going to have to stop growing. So the closest we get is about 20, and that's the soldiers coming back. So we work with a lot of them, but below 20, they're still growing. Their bodies are still changing enough that it's kind of a moving target. But I would really like to someday. I'd love to figure out a good solution, because the emotional state of children is such an important thing to address. That I think this is all about addressing somebody's emotional state. That said, everything else we're doing in the company has applications for children. So we're doing, all the other guys, the other 9 people at the company, they're working on a lot of stuff for children. And it is pretty exciting. We're doing some things that I think are really going to change children's musculoskeletal care in a couple areas. And that is exciting. That gets me out of bed in the morning. Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking about any other parts of the body?
Yeah, the question is, are we thinking of other parts of the body? Everything we do is other parts of the body. I'm the only one in the company who's doing leg. Oh, me and Gustavo, raise your hand, who started last week, who's from CCA here. We're the only ones doing legs in the company. Everyone else is working on all the other stuff. and we're working on every other part of the body where this technology applies. Unfortunately, the patents haven't issued, and we're under intellectual property disclosure issues, so I can't say anything about it. Give me a year. I'd love to talk about it because it's just really cool, but we're pretty limited in what we can say. Lots of questions? Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.